All right. Welcome back to a little bit of algebra. We're doing a Chapter 3 review. I'm going to go over a few of these questions, not all of them, and not in depth, just briefly. Determine whether it is a function. Okay, if you have a table like this, you want to check to see does any x value repeat. Domain x is a faithful hun. Okay, that is a function. To see whether it's linear or non-linear, we need to have a constant rate of change. Remember, rate of change is change in y over change in x. Okay, change here is 1, 1, 1. So the change in x is 1 every time. 1, 1, 1. And here we have a change of positive 2, and positive 2. So it is linear. All right, now here, notice we have an input for x and an input for y. And in this case, for every x we plug in, we get a different y. I can solve this. I can divide both sides by 2x, solve it for y, but I cannot write it in slope-intercept form. I can write this as negative 4 over x, but I can't write it as y equals mx plus b. So yes, it's a function, but it is nonlinear. If you look at this over here, 2 is paired with 7 and 2 is paired with 8, so it is not a function. All right, to determine whether it is a function and finding the domain. First, is it a function? Well, we have an x to plug in and a y to get out, so yes, that's a function. The domain, in order to find the domain, I have to find the possible x values. Well, I have to determine what can I have under a radical sign. Well, under a radical sign, it has to be a non-negative, so it has to be greater than or equal to 0. That means 2x plus 3 has to be greater than or equal to 0. So solve for x to find what value of x makes this entire expression greater than or equal to 0. Subtract 3 from each side. 2x has to be greater than or equal to negative 3. Divide by 2 on each side, and x has to be greater than or equal to negative 3 over 2, or negative 1.5. On this next problem, this is not a function. However, it still has a domain of x is negative 8. Remember, that is a vertical line at negative 8, right? So, oops, negative 8, sorry, the other way around. Shoop. This is our line here at x equals negative 8. This is x and y. Okay, next. In a denominator, we cannot have 0. You cannot divide by 0, so x plus 1 cannot be 0. So we want to find out what x cannot be. X cannot be negative 1. So the domain is all values so that x is not negative 1. Right, so either greater than or less than negative 1 are all real numbers other than negative 1. Okay, domain and range. Domain, x values, are all of them are covered, so that's all real numbers. Bam. And then the y values are y is greater than or equal to 0, because all these y values are covered, none of these down here. This is a discrete function, so the domain, okay, this one's continuous, this one's discrete. Domain, x values, negative 1, 0, 2, and 4. Negative 1, 0, 2, and 4. Remember, in a set like this, we do not repeat any values. So for y, the smallest value is negative 2. We go in order. Then we have negative 1. There are 2 values at negative 1, but we only list negative 1 once, and then 1, 2, 3, 3 right there. Okay, so that's our set, and this is discrete. This one is continuous. Okay, let's see. I'm going to do set these up for the negative, because this is where mistakes happen. If I plug in a negative value here, remember, we're going to replace x. So we put parentheses where that x is. G of x is equal to this. So when we plug that in, I'm going to plug the -3 in here. The exponent happens first. That gives me +9. Everything else carries down. That negative carries down, and this carries down. So g, and this should be g of -3. G of -3 is equal to -9 minus 7. So g of -3 is equal to -16. Mistakes here again happen. One of them is that we switch the signs inside the absolute value. The absolute value does not switch the signs. Once you've solved it all, then take your answer and make it positive. So we put in a -3 there, -2, absolute value of h is -3 is -2 times -3 minus 6. Absolute value of this is +6 minus 6 is 0. Absolute value of 0 is 0. So h of -3 is equal to 0. So that would be our first one. Okay, I'm going to skip this, move forward. These are all basically the same, how they work. K of x is -4, so I'm going to replace k of x with -4 is equal to 3/2x minus 1. I want to solve for x, so I'm going to add 1 to each side. So +1, +1. That cancels out. Now we have -3 is equal to 3/2x. We want to multiply each side by the reciprocal. To divide by 3/2, multiply by the reciprocal, times 2/3 times 2/3. Remember, -3 can be written as 3/1. These 3's cancel out, the 2's cancel out, and we're left with x, which was our goal. And then on the other side, 3 and 3 cancel out. 2 times 1 is -2/1 is just -2. So in this one, x equals -2. The others work similarly. If you know k of x or t of x is this, and you plug that in there and find x. Identify the slope and y-intercept. Remember, when there's no coefficient, there's a 1 there. So the slope in 16 is -1. The y-intercept is 3. The x-intercept, we have to make y 0 for the x-intercept. So we have 0 is equal to -x plus 3. Subtract 3 from each side. -3 is equal to -x. Divide by -1. And then +3 is equal to x. So the x-intercept is +3. Here, we can find the x and y-intercept first, and then to find the slope, we'll put it in slope-intercept form. So if I plug in 0 for x, then this falls away. Now we have -6, so we need to divide by 6 on each side, and then y is equal, -6, -14/6, which can be simplified to 7/3. So the y-intercept is -7/3. Then if I want to find the x-intercept, I make y 0, so all this falls away. Divide by 4 on each side. Then I get x is equal to, simplify this. This was a 4. 14/4 simplifies to 7/2. So that's 7/2. And then now finally for the slope, I do need to solve this for y. Subtract 4x from each side. Minus 4x, boom, -6y is equal to -4x minus 14. Divide by -6, that was a negative here. Divide by -6, each one of these. This cancels out, y is equal to, and now negative 4 over negative 6. Negative divided by negative is positive. 4 over 6 simplifies to 2/3 x, and then minus minus would be plus. Again, this would be 7 over 3. But we wanted to know the slope, and so we have 2 over 3, and 2/3. Now notice that I got plus 7 over 3 here. So I made a mistake somewhere. Oh, this right here should say plus 14 divided by negative 6 gives me negative 7 over 3. There we go. Y-intercept is negative 7 over 3. Slope is 2/3. And this last one, if we want to find them, we know that this is going to be y equals something and there is no x. That's a horizontal line. Okay, and a horizontal line does not have an x-intercept. So there is none for the x-intercept. Subtract 4 from each side, minus 4. Boom. 3y is equal to negative 14. Divide by 3 on each side, and y is equal to negative 14 over 3. Okay, so the y-intercept is negative 14 over 3. The slope, okay, so that's down here somewhere in the negatives. Since there's no x value, that means it's 0x. Y equals 0x minus 14 over 3. So the slope is 0. Boom. Last couple problems I'm going to do for this review here. Notice that the change in y here is 0. So it doesn't matter what the x is, or it's going to come out to be 0. So the slope is 0 for this one. M equals 0. On number 20, the change in y from negative 1 to 2 is 3. And the change in x from 1 is 2, so that's 3 over 2. Now let's check to make sure here. Here we have a change of 4. So that seems to not be consistent, but then here we have a change of 6. 6 over 4, that's an equivalent expression. Here we have negative 8. Negative 8. Here we have negative 12. So that'd be negative 12 over negative 8. The negatives cancel out. Simplify this by 4 and we get 3 over 2. Alright, that's all for this review. And check in again next time for another fun lesson.